Well, a spate of disturbing videos have shown an outburst of violence and ill discipline at various schools across the country, and it's once again thrown sharp focus on how to combat such antisocial behaviour at school level already. Schools have seen a spike in bullying and classroom violence in recent months. To help us unpack what motivates such behaviour and the interventions that should be involved is counselling psychologist Jeremy Beyer. Good afternoon, Jeremy. Welcome to the SABC News Desk. I know you're a little bit under the weather, so I do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, no problem.
Jeremy, this kind of learner-on-learner violence or learner-on-teacher violence or vice versa, it's not something new, but the frequency is indeed alarming, and the sheer force and anger we're seeing behind such behaviour is quite disturbing. What motivates this at school level already in somebody so young?
Well, there's numerous factors, and to look at what motivates it, I'm going to simplify it by sort of splitting it up into categories. Firstly, in the homes, there's either abuse or neglect in the homes. So children are modelling sort of abusive fathers who perhaps beating up their mothers or who are abusive. Children model this, and then they take that behaviour to schools because I think this is how you solve conflict. In the schools themselves, there's not a lot of sort of processes or plans in place to combat bullying, or there are not sort of stringent rules in place to deal with it. There's no school counsellor, so a lot of kids who come to school are highly traumatised, and there's no counsellor. So they think, in order for me to cope, I've got to react with aggression. And then easy access of weapons in these communities. And because they're witnessing aggression every day in violent communities, and there's no sign of hope. So there's no positive praise at home or anything like that. They only see a bad future. And when this happens, when you only have frustration, this ultimately leads to aggression and violence in schools.
Now, we are seeing this sort of violence manifest across all kinds of schools, in poor areas, in affluent areas. So is it safe to say that this has nothing really to do with the resources, but this is a societal problem because we're struggling with, because poverty doesn't necessarily equate to violence?
No, it doesn't. And listen, poverty is a factor when people have no hope, and there's not a lot of sporting facilities after school, and then they get lured into drugs and crime in the afternoons, or they come from abusive homes. And of course it is. But abusive homes come from anywhere, whether you're middle class, rich, doesn't matter where you come from. Because of how parents have to work these days, because of what time they come home, there's less focus on their children, there's less love, there's less sort of parental care, and really being there for the children. Children are highly frustrated because there's a lack of love, and so they take this anger out on other kids at school.
When it comes to the parental care, the reality is that the majority of our family units in South Africa are indeed fragmented due to a whole lot of historical influences given the migratory labour system we had in place. But the fact remains, we have one of the highest rates of father absenteeism on the globe. How does one parent effectively, if you haven't had the experience of having a full-time mother or father, Jeremy?
How does one parent?
It's a difficult one. How does one parent effectively, if you haven't had a full-time mom or dad?
Well, listen, the parent has to parent with the same rules in place. So there still has to be love. There must be neglect or abuse. There's still got to be the teaching of basic human values. So saying thank you, being grateful for what you have. Whether you only have a mother or a father, still those basic principles have to be in place, and still there has to be love in place, because there are a lot of successful single mothers. There are a lot of that. So if there's love there, if there's praise, if there's good rules in place, if the parents teach them children good values and not to bully and not to cyberbully, the kid can be successful. I will say though that for many boys, for example, they could do with more male role models, because that is distinctly lacking. And as a therapist, I can tell you that it is such a common story where there's absent fathers, and then the boys are suffering because they're not having those sort of role models growing up. So that is a problem, absolutely.
On another note, social media has added a whole new dimension to this problem now. How is this kind of technology actually fueling or propagating the problem? Because on the one hand, it is alerting authorities and the community to what is going on, so we can respond effectively. But then we also increase the risk of copycat behaviour, perhaps?
We do that, and remember with social media, if you're a cyberbully, you get the sort of twisted sense of freedom. So because you're further away from the victim, you feel like you've got more freedom to say and do as you please. So because of that, more gets said, And the impact is worse because the whole school sees it. Well, for example, it's not an isolated bullying incident on the playground, everyone sees it. And the internet is extremely difficult to navigate or to monitor, or the parents aren't there to watch their children, or they don't give them rules, or the kids are already using iPads at too young an age, but emotionally they're not ready for it. And so because of that, although they're using this young, emotionally they're not ready for it, which means they are susceptible to bullies or are susceptible to predators and those types of things, which leads to more trouble. So while they're pros, they're cons as well.
Jeremy, what kind of interventions should we be looking at school levels to help not only the victims but also the perpetrators? Because we've got a very small window there to actually help these learners out before they go out into the real world and continue with this antisocial behaviour.
So again, I'll break it up into categories. Firstly, considerably more focus on mental health. So more psychologists, social workers and counsellors in schools, and more psychoeducation for teachers and parents. Then more of a stronger relationship between parents and teachers in the schools, because often teachers are seeing bullying and the parents don't know what's going on. So there's got to be a stronger relationship. The schools needs to have a stronger bullying policies in place. Government, as far as government is concerned, there needs to be stronger laws against bullying, and they need to be aware of the easy access of weapons and drugs, because a lot of kids who come to school are under the influence, or they're taking weapons to school. So there needs to be governmental intervention as well. There needs to be more sporting facilities in schools as well, because a lot of these kids in the afternoon are going home and doing nothing, whereas they've got all this energy. It could be channeled into sports, so I recommend that. And then finally, for parents, more focusing on your children, more praise, teaching them the right values, teaching them the dangers of bullying, and being aware as a parent of what are your children modelling at home. Because if they model at home, they'll take it to school.
Jeremy Beyer joining us on the SABC News Desk. Thank you for sharing your time, and do get better soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, let's